Hello, I am back and I'm going to talk about another gear topic. I'm going to do 4 this time just to be difficult. I'm going to talk about limiters and clippers. I picked 4 because there's 4 that I use for certain things, and I'll explain my thinking behind them and why I use them. Most of these limiters have a lot more scope to their use than what I use them for, but I have a particular favourite function of all of them, and I'll often use them together. So I'll use like usually 2, usually not 3. I have used 3 limiters before. That's often when something needs sorting out earlier on the chain because there's some sort of proper problem. So the first one that I use all the time because it's my final output level control. So I use this for my headroom, I use this for my like true peak checking and stuff, which is the Ozone maximizer. Ozone maximizer is a really good global end of chain limiter because the intelligent release control IRC thing that they use is really good for adapting to any nasties basically. So I use it a lot in balanced or like the clipping mode, which is like probably better for like dense rock loud pop stuff. But what it's really good at is essentially reacting to tricky signals, and therefore it can be very, very transparent. When it's in clipping mode, it is a little more aggressive, and you do occasionally, if you've got like a sustained bass note, you can get like a bit of a tear out. But I use another limiter. If I hear that, I tend to try and keep the final limiter just for like 1 dB's gain reduction, just the final output, and just setting the actual the levels and having control over the levels and doing my actual boosting up my gain. Now, the second limiter that I use a lot is one that I use often before the maximizer. This is my cat Inca. Say hello to Inca. Oh yeah. I'm going to hold it here for a little bit, and I'm going to hope that the YouTube will think this is a great thumbnail. I mean, she's absolutely gorgeous, isn't she? So she's very floppy as well. Anyway, I'm going to put her down. She wants to go outside. Limitless by DMG Audio, which is a multi-band limiter, and it works in 2 modes. It's got like a peak limiting mode and a dynamic control mode, like a sort of fast compressor. I use it usually about 50-50 on the 2. I find that you can tune it more towards the dynamics if you've got the occasional like 1 or 2 parts of the song have one big peak. You know, if you look at the waveform and you see like one vocal just like jumps over, the dynamic mode is more useful for that. I usually do this for like again like just a 1 dB gain reduction, and the thing I like about it is that you can tune the multiband element towards certain areas. So if you've got a mix where the cymbals are constantly, or the snare is constantly hitting the limiter, and at the same time you've got a bass note which is like louder than the other notes and is pushing the final limiter too hard, the Limitless is a really good way to tucking that in. If you overuse it, it changes the tone of the audio quite a lot, like it re-EQs it. But if you're just using it for that 1 or 2 times in the mix where it pops over, it's very good at adapting to that. I mean, it's a fairly good, just straight limiter as well. But I find that for when I want to do my single band final output, the Ozone maximizer is more useful to me for a couple of different reasons. Like I said in the last video, excuse my particularly nasal sounding voice, it's because I've got hay fever, which just makes me sound like even more of a nerd than normal. But yeah, the Limitless, if you had no other limiters, it would be perfectly suitable as your final limiter, but I use it for this sort of emphasizing the final dynamics going into my last limiter. Which brings me on to the third thing that I use. I've been using this for a little while now. It's really, really cheap. It's Standard Clip, which is by SIR. Some people mock the interface a little bit. I kind of like it. It's got a sort of Windows XP feel to it, which is nostalgic for me. But in its most sort of standard mode, if you excuse the pun, it's basically a really good hard clipper that you can control a little bit. So it's basically like similar to just lopping off the top of a waveform. Now, obviously, we usually try and avoid clipping when we don't have control over it. But clipping can be quite good for if you've got transients which are overtly distant from the rest of the signal. Happens a lot with electronic music, with electronically generated signals, and also happens quite a lot with when people have used transient exciters and they've used it a little bit too much. So if you've literally just got like a little ping in time, and that's constantly hitting the limiter, and that's pushing the whole thing down, clipping can be a good way to basically shave it off. One of the nice things about the standard clip is that you can bring it down. It's basically got really good gain structure control, and you can type in values, so you can literally be like, on my final limiter, it's going over 0.5 too much for this bit. Go to standard clip, 0.5 gain reduction. You know, it's very mastering friendly in that sense. You know, when we're working with the minutiae of the peaks, we're not like just slamming stuff into it. And then you can also tune it into the soft clip mode. So if the hard clip mode sounds too aggressive, but you still prefer the idea of clipping to limiting for tone reasons, you can then put it in soft clip mode. You've got like a slider where you can control between soft and hard. It's also like little things like the fact that it's massively resizable is really useful for me, and you can change the metering to like 3 dBs. I might actually message the guy and say, can we have within 1 dB metering as well? Again, the minutiae in mastering is like, it's really important when you want to know, like when you've got your set, you're really pushing the gain up of everything, and you've got the last little bits of the gain structure, and you want to have complete control. You really don't want to push it to collapse, and that's, you know, where these clips can come in usefully. The last one again is a really clever overall limiter, but I only use one section of it really. Is the Tokyo Dawn Labs TDR Limiter No.6, which is like a sort of limiter toolbox sort of thing. The section that I use is the high frequency limiter. It's just really good for like getting rid of overexcited high frequency transients. It's got a listen function as well. It's really cool. You can listen to the delta, so you can listen to just what you're taking out. I sometimes use that after a de-esser, just to get rid of the really fast stuff. So if you're using a de-esser or a dynamic EQ to take out like things like cymbal harshness or just S's on vocals, sometimes the very, very first bit of it goes through, even with a really fast thing like Tokyo Dawn Nova. And I find this is really good for that. It's also really good for if you're at the final part of your limiting and it's constantly high frequency stuff, which is going into your limiter. You can sort of do a similar thing with like I said, with Limitless, but like just on the high frequencies. So that's really cool. I mean, the other stuff on it is great as well. Like, I just don't use it because I use all the other sections on stuff I've already got and I'm used to it. Really good metering. It's got really good dynamic range meter. It's really cheap as well for what it is. It gives you basically everything. It's got like a clipper section as well. You could just use this for everything that I've described pretty much. It's got a multiband mode as well, but I just like a bit more control. So yeah, so that's 4 limiter clippers that I use. Ozone maximizer, these are my final output generally. The DMG Limitless, which is a multi-band limiter that has a couple of different modes, and then you can toggle between the two. The SIR standard clip, which is a hard clipper that also has a soft clip version that you can tune in and out. And the Tokyo Dawn TDR Limiter No.6. Again, none of them particularly expensive. They range from like 20 to about 150 quid. Heavily recommend them. Let me know about what you think about limiters and your favourite limiters and clippers. If I missed something, I've been constantly trying to find new clippers at the moment because they're sort of they can go from sounding completely transparent to awful very quickly. So I do like to know that stuff. So yeah, thanks a lot. I'm hoping that the video will be able to have a picture of my cat as the thumbnail because most of them are just me going like, it doesn't look great, but also I'm trying to make this relaxed. I'm not trying to have like me posing and stuff on them. We'll do another round of gear talk soon, but I'm going to go back to some other bits and bobs now and start talking about some genres and my approach to genres because that's something people have asked me about. Anyway, cool. See ya. Goodbye.